The history of heavy.
Welcome to the History of Heavy podcast, a show that traces the chronology of heavy music across genres, song by song. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Lieberman, and I want to say hello to my co-host, Michael Huntsman.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Mike.
Can I first of all say, for those of you listening on an audio podcast format rather than on YouTube, you look absolutely dashing today in your brand new Black Sabbath tracksuit.
Well, thank you. As I was telling you prior to the podcast, we're at the end of the year here, and I will be renewing my New Year's resolutions to get fit. So the first thing I did was bought a Black Sabbath tracksuit because that's what you need to do to get fit.
Well, you look dope as hell.
Thanks, bro.
And I love having you host. We do this when you select the song to be discussed, and tonight is one of those songs. So real happy to have you lead us on our journey tonight.
Right on. Tonight is episode 41, and we will be discussing Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of fun tidbits to talk about, and of course, our thoughts of the song. But before we get into that, Michael, can you take us to the cultural corner?
I would be honored to man the cultural corner this evening. It's a milestone a little bit, Dave, in that this has been our shortest stint in any year so far. This is episode 2 of 1972, and it is 2 of 2. We move into 1973 promptly. We will have another stop in 1972, which we will talk about at the end of the show. But this is the last song from 1972 we're talking about. So I like that you're hosting, and I like that you picked this topic because I think it's interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. I decided to take this in a very specific direction. You do such a good job setting the cultural scene for every song we talk about, every year we talk about, where you kind of talk about the socioeconomic climate, you talk about the growth of technology, you talk about what's happening in pop culture. And then sometimes we like to narrow the focus a little bit and get into a singular topic or band. Often we'll talk about a single artist if it's somebody significant like Zeppelin or the Beatles or whomever. Tonight, I decided to take it in a very specific direction while I host the Cultural Corner. We spoke a few episodes ago about how, despite the fact that we are a podcast dedicated to heavy music and that the electric guitar is undoubtedly the key instrument in most forms of heavy, we have somehow neglected to talk about it that much outside of sort of key, milestone or iconic guitar players like Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Hazel of Funkadelic, or of course our Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi conversations. But that changes tonight because I am going to spend this cultural corner talking about the history of instrumental guitar rock up until 1972.
Awesome. I love this.
Okay, great. Well, I will set the scene. Feel free to interject at any point, or if I miss anything, certainly flag it. But, we started this podcast with our very first episode dedicated to Link Wray and his instrumental ode to hot rods and being up to no good, Rumble, which was released in 1958. And that same year, Dwayne Eddy released his debut LP that included the twangy guitar classics Rebel Rouser and Movin' and Groovin', both sort of classic guitar instrumentals. 2 years later, in 1960, surf guitar legends The Ventures would release their classic Walk Don't Run, and the long-running UK band The Shadows had their first ever hit with the great guitar instrumental Apache.
Mm.
In 1962, maybe the greatest purveyor of instrumental guitar rock ever, Dick Dale, released his debut album with the Deltones, Surfer's Choice, which included the classics Sloop John B. and, of course, Miserlou, which would later be covered by OC Punk greats Agent Orange, and, of course, be featured as the opening title song in the opening title sequence of 1994's Pulp Fiction. Also in 1962, surf guitar is prominently featured in the James Bond theme that plays over the opening credits of the Sean Connery film Dr. No. And that guitar is featured in the theme for James Bond in all of the Sean Connery Bond films. However, not all great guitar instrumentals were coming from Southern California, as also in 1962, Booker T and the MGs from Memphis, Tennessee, released their debut, which included the R&B soul classic Green Onions, that fused a smooth Hammond organ with Steve Cropper's impeccable guitar work. And very strangely, Steve Kruper is actually, I think, how his name is pronounced. I wrote this as I was doing this research and going back and listening to these songs. I wrote this 3 days ago, 4 days ago, whatever it was. The very next day, I got an alert that said that Steve Kruper had died at the
Oh,
age of, I think, 92. So
wow.
R.I.P. But I had never written the man's name before. He's a legendary. Booker T and the MGs is an all-time great.
Sure.
But I had never written the man's name. I wrote it to talk about him and this song and his band tonight. The next day, it was just bizarre synchronicity. So
Well, we're
R.I.P.
gonna circle back to Booker T
Okay,
uh, in a little bit. Interesting.
perfect. Okay, then in 1963, we head back to the beach as the surf guitar craze was still in full bloom, as the Shantays released their classic Pipeline, which was also later covered by Orange County greats Agent Orange. By the time we get back to 1968, virtuosity had entered the picture as Jeff Beck released his debut album Truth, which includes the instrumental Beck's Bolero. That is a tastefully hypnotic track that would ultimately lead to Eddie Van Halen's Eruption 10 years later and all kinds of wanky guitar masturbation after that, sadly. In 1969, The Ventures would have another hit with their guitar-led version of the Hawaii Five-O theme. And later that year, Santana's debut would include several Latin-flavored guitar instrumentals, including the album's closing track, Soul Sacrifice.
Hmm.
Then in 1972, the Edgar Winter Group released their debut album, They Only Come Out at Night, which closes with the album's lone instrumental, which is tonight's topic, and that is Frankenstein. I made a 50-song guitar instrumental Spotify playlist
Oh,
called Guitar and Safari, which I will share in the link to this show, but a lot of these songs, many that I have just mentioned, and a lot of these 50 that I added to this playlist, would not ever, they're not on our list to talk about. They're not things that would be
right.
defined necessarily as heavy. But listening to the evolution of the way the guitar was approached, the way guitar was used to carry the melody in these songs without a vocal melody, those songs that were heavy and dangerous, like Rumble by Link Ray, and that the song we'll talk about tonight. And then when we get into those bands that those guitar players that I don't think either of us care much for, the Steve Vai's or the Joe Satriani's of the world, but watching that evolution of just how the guitar has kind of ebbed and flowed in popularity and how it's been used as a lead instrument, I think is interesting to the conversation and obviously applicable to talking about the Edgar Winter Group. So that is the short abbreviated history of instrumental guitar rock from 1958 to 1972.
What a great foundation to build our conversation on tonight, Mike. That is wonderful. And I do want to give a shout out to the ride along playlist. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. You have always been a mixtape guy and
Mhm.
kind of express yourself and express your points in terms of mixtapes, and I love that.
Yeah.
You are a mixtape virtuoso. Uh, and I do a lot of audiobook reading, and sometimes they'll come with a ride along PDF. This is amazing. We've reached a new level of our podcast because we have um, some additional appendix style music to listen to. That's
Deep dive
wonderful.
opportunities for sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, that is a great setup for what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the song Frankenstein by Edgar Winter Group. And so I'm just going to jump right in. Frankenstein is an instrumental track. It is featured on the 1972 album They Only Come Out at Night, and it was additionally released as a single. This song topped the US Billboard Hot 100 chart for a week in May 1973. Frankenstein sold over 1 million copies. It fared equally well in Canada, reaching number one on the RPM 100 top singles chart the following month. The same month, the song peaked at number 18 in the UK singles chart. The following month, the song peaked at number 10 in Mexico, and it also peaked at number 39 in West Germany, remaining on the chart for a week there. The single was certified gold on June 19th, 1973, by the Recording Industry Association of America. Coined by the band's drummer, Chuck Roth, the song's title came about from a massive editing of the original studio recording. As the band deviated from the musical arrangements into less structured jams, the song required numerous edits to shorten it. The final track was spliced together from many sections of the original recording. Winter also frequently referred to the appropriateness of the name in relation to its monster-like lumbering beat. This one riff was first used by Winter in the song Hung Up on his jazz-oriented first album, Entrance. He later tried a variation on it, Martians, in the 1981 Standing on Rock album. Winter played many of the instruments on the track, including keyboards, alto sax, and timbales. That's our circle back to um, Booker T and the MGs. I think we'll get into the interplay between how he's able to voice, he's able to express the voices of keyboard and guitar. Um, As the release's only instrumental cut, the song was not initially intended to be on the album. It was only included on a whim as a last minute addition. It was originally released as the B side to Hangin' Around, but the two were soon reversed by the label when disc jockeys nationwide in the United States as well as in Canada were inundated with phone calls and realized this was the hit. The song features a double drum solo with Roth on drums and Winter on percussion. In fact, the working title of the song was The Double Drum Song. The group performed the song with Rick Derringer on guitar on The Old Grey Whistle Test in 1973, which I believe was a British music show. That version featured there was over 9 minutes and is considered superior to the studio version at less than 5 minutes. The song is described as hard rock, progressive rock, and blues rock, and an example of art rock by non art rock bands. So that's a little bit about the song, and let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Winter. Edgar Holland Winter was born December 28, 1946, in the dead of winter. We're recording this in December. He's a multi instrumentalist, working as a vocalist along with playing keyboard, saxophone, and percussion. Winter invented the keyboard body strap early in his career, an innovation that allows him the freedom to move around on stage during his multi instrument high energy performances. Credited with a staggering list of genres: Southern rock, pop, jazz, fusion, blues, rock, blue eyed soul, and boogie rock. This introduced me to Blue Eyed Soul, which is also called White Soul. It's rhythm and blues and soul music performed by white artists. The term was coined in the mid 60s to describe white artists whose sound was similar to that of the predominantly black Motown and Stax record labels. While his success peaked in the 1970s with his band, the Edgar Winter Group, and their popular songs Frankenstein and Free Ride, He was a prolific collaborator, appearing on recordings such as playing the saxophone on Meatloaf's All Revved Up and No Place to Go, Dan Hartman's solo hit Instant Replay, Tina Turner's Simply the Best, and David Lee Roth's remake of Just a Gigolo,
Huh.
as well as appearing on material by Rick Derringer, Johnny Winter, his brother, Ronnie Montrose, Todd Rundgren, Michael McDonald, and many others. He also played with Ringo Starr in the ninth, 10th, 11th, and 15th iterations of his All Star Band. From early August to early September 2017, the Edgar Winter Band toured as the opening act for both Deep Purple and Alice Cooper as they performed several North American tour dates as part of the Long Goodbye Tour. He is notably the brother of late blues singer and guitarist Johnny Winter, and also, interestingly, they were both born with albinism. He was an albino. So that's a lot of background about Edgar Winter and some background about the song Frankenstein. I really enjoy this song, and that's why I wanted to bring it to the podcast. But, Mike, is this song heavy?
This song is definitely heavy. And I am stoked that you brought it to the conversation because, as happens sometimes, and I am generally the curator of the show, so I think it happens to you more often than me just by nature of the curation. I was educated by this. I and it was really look the Edgar Winter Group and Edgar Winter specifically is somebody that I have of course been aware of. Like everybody I think with any, knowledge of any kind of knows who Edgar Winter is, but a total blind spot for me.
Yeah.
Frankenstein, this song, and of course Free Ride, which was a massive hit. I know both of those songs. I don't think if you played them for me 3 weeks ago and said, "Who is this?" I would have immediately been able to say Edgar Winter. Like he,
I thought Free Ride was Foghat.
oh yeah. It's got very Foghat energy. You're thinking of Slow Ride, but yeah,
I am thinking of Slow Ride, but
yeah,
that's why I thought that.
yeah. Uh, so doing a bit of a deep dive into his music for this conversation and not just constraining it to Frankenstein. And I wouldn't describe a lot of his music necessarily as heavy, but I dig it. Like I love this whole record. Like he's great. And I have been so obsessed in recent I'll say decades, not years, decades with 70s hard rock and acid rock and psychedelic rock and electric blues and blah 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 blah, that how he escaped me I have no idea. So you talked about my playlists. I have dozens of playlists dedicated to exactly this kind of music, none of which include the Edgar Winter Group, but I will certainly go back and do some editing to correct that. So thank you
Or,
for that.
yeah,
Thoroughly enjoyed Edgar Winter. Frankenstein in particular, I think, is a perfect addition to our conversation. As we go back, we talked about that first episode dedicated to Link Ray's Rumble, a guitar rock instrumental. We've talked about instrumentals from Funkadelic and John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane. We've covered a few instrumentals, and this is really, really a good. If you just take the instrumentals we've talked about, a good sort of progression in the heaviness and the approach to kinds of instrumental music and instrumental rock in particular, how it evolved over the years since that, those late 50 songs. The and like Link Ray, Frankenstein has kind of an attitude and a very specific energy to it that I think, above and beyond it being sonically heavy, it is attitudinally heavy, which is so cool. And I absolutely dug it. And when you first suggested it, and the song, I want to you had, I don't know, 8 or 10 or however many it was songs you wanted to bring into the conversation. This was one of them. The tune didn't immediately come to mind. What I immediately started thinking about, just because of the song's title, was like the Monster Mash. I was
Yeah.
thinking of it as kind of a novelty, you know, kind of
Pitchy.
yeah, kitschy is
Yeah.
the right word, but it is not that at all.
Yeah.
It is sonically heavy. It's got all kinds of spit and grit, and yeah, man, I really dug it.
Right on. I'm so glad when I can turn on that light bulb in you that you keep turning on in me. Um, it's such a warm, fuzzy feeling to come to something brand new that you've been aware of, you've sort of known about, but you really sit with it for the first time and it moves. It just moves you and it turns something else on. I love that.
Well, and it's the beauty of, you know, we could talk about the and have talked about the benefits and the detriments to streaming music and these streaming platforms, and how, you know, you listen to something today and you forget about it because there's so much music to listen to tomorrow, versus sitting with one album that you only own 10 of or whatever, and you have to listen to those albums nonstop for 6 months before you get another one.
Right.
But one of the nice things about streaming is now, you know, the way my brain works is now I'm going to go back to the first Edgar Winter record and just listen to his whole discography. It's like, what else is in there that I haven't heard? And it's obviously right at my fingertips. I'm looking at his monthly listeners. It's 371,000. So, you know, at right around that number, before you get to the millions, and when you're more than the kind of double digit thousands or whatever, that's like a hardcore following. You know, that's not
Yes.
because you had a
Yes.
big TikTok video or your song was in a movie, and it's not just your friends and family. It's like he's got a hardcore fan base, you know, and it's like,
Although
okay,
to
I'm
give him credit, his songs have been in dozens of movies.
yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, just Free Ride, but a ton of others have been in a lot of. There was a whole list in the Wikipedia of a bunch of movies it's been in.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. The his most recent release is from 1984,
Mhm.
and it's a re-release of Frankenstein. Or
Yeah,
it's a new version of Frankenstein. It's called Frankenstein 1984. So just, well, no, actually, this came out in 2025. I'm sorry. It's called 1984, but it's Frankenstein. 1984 is the name of the song. Came out this year, 2025. So it's got a bunch of edits and remixes and stuff.
nice.
So what made you
Um,
pick it? Like how did was it top of mind, or how did you come to it?
so because of my streaming preferences and because I spend a lot of time in this era, it popped up at one point when one of my playlists expired and ran dry, and it just threw this in there. And I've always felt like I've known about this song and thought that it had such a great hook of a riff that I always liked it, but I never really sat with it to get much past that riff. And coming to it in recent years, it's got that riff, but my God, it's got a groove. It is so funky. And this is where we kind of tag back to um, Booker T, because that Booker T instrumental, Green Onions, is so funky. And it's that interplay between, it's not just the interplay between the organ and the guitar. There's a stank on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that's definitely in this song. And that's something that I find a, a definition of heavy for me. I want that stank, that
Yeah.
groove, that weight. Um, I want to move that butt, like a butt in there. There's a big booty. And Edgar Winter, being a keyboardist and being a really prolific keyboardist, is able to bring that quality into this song. And it is such a good balance to that big, heavy monster riff. So that's another reason that I wanted to bring it to this conversation. And one of the reasons that I love it so much. It gets just as groovy as it does heavy.
I'm glad you said groovy. You know, as we have talked about things like Alice Coltrane as an example, who we reference probably more than any podcast not dedicated to jazz, I would guess. But
Yeah.
how Alice Cooper, and we've talked about the drone and the specific energy that kind of jazz has specifically influenced bands like Sun, and how heavy music has built off of that. The groove you're talking about with Edgar Winter Group, I don't feel like it's that many chess moves to get to 90s era groove metal of like White Zombie and Pantera. Like that's sort of this energy, with just
Totally.
more amped, tuned down guitars and a little bit more, more tattoos and whatever. But although
Sure.
Edgar has his share. Um,
Sure. Well, and I mean, this definitely feels like a page out of Geezer Butler's playbook.
yeah.
This is one of the things that brings me back to Sabbath all the time is the grooviness that Geezer Butler brings to the heaviness of Tony Iommi's riffs and the swinginess of Bill Ward's drumming. That
Yeah.
those elements together really have polarized my filter for what is heavy, and this does all those things.
100%. The you know
Double
the
drum solo, right?
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes there are, and I won't be able to think of an example off the top of my head, but I think there's some instrumental music, not just guitar based, but instrumental, but specifically, I guess, guitar based instrumental music is, sometimes I'll hear an instrumental and I'll feel like, what a waste of this riff. Like this would have been
Yeah.
such a great song, and why did they just use it in this instrumental? And then there's others like Miserlou or Wipeout or whatever, where you're like, oh, this is, words would just ruin this song. I think Frankenstein is one of those. I think it's so much better for the absence of vocals that it just makes it that much more kind of heavy and intense.
Mm.
And one of the things that really struck me, and this, maybe this is just my ignorance or stereotyping or whatever it is about the way Edgar Winter looks and how who I understood him to be, which is clearly wrong. I always lumped him with in the 70s with like ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner and Molly Hatchet, all of whom I love. But to me, his music sounds way more like the aforementioned Foghat, or though even Aerosmith, like those Ted Nugent, like
But
those.
he's got a foot in Southern rock. And his
Yeah,
brother was a blues guy. Like,
but he doesn't sound as much Southern rock to me. I mean, blues for sure.
no, but
But
he has that DNA.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
right.
you're forgiven for making that assumption without being an Edgar Winter fan because he totally has that DNA.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't know anything about his multi instrumentalist talents. Like I had no idea
Yeah.
about any of that.
Yeah. It's
When
amazing.
you think of this song, and you talked about your playlist that started to be backfilled by this song and whatever else, who would you lump it in with? Like, what genre or what other artists do you feel like it's connected to?
For it it's going to sound a little cliche, but this song pairs well with Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult.
Hmm.
Although I don't think that the rest of Blue Oyster Cult's discography is quite as well paired. That song certainly, like I have them back to back on a playlist, and I'm used to them together, but they seem to go well together. And it's almost silly because they're both these monster songs,
Yeah.
but they're both bitchin' songs in their own right. And I
Yeah.
like that there's that bitchin' kitschiness about it.
Yeah, look,
Um,
I'm already making a playlist in my head. I've got the Misfits Vampira. I've got Hearts Barracuda.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Monster Mash. Like, there's a bunch. Like all right, yeah, this is good stuff.
I can't wait for that one. That's going to be on the next episode.
That's right. That's right.
We'll tag that back. That this song was the song that was an afterthought. This song was whittled down to make it onto the album, It was a B-side to a single, but this is the song that spoke to people. And I feel like it has so much emotion in it. And what it captures is one of the things that Edgar Winters is known for. Edgar Winter, he's not Winters, it's Winter.
It's not real. It's not Masters. It's Master.
I do this a lot. It's a feature, not a bug. Um, is this stage performance that is very uh, entertaining. And I remember we went to an Ozfest 15 years ago, and Iron Maiden was playing. And Sabbath had some semblance of a reunion there. And we're Sabbath guys, and I'm here for it. But man, Bruce Dickinson showed up, and I was like, this guy's here to work. He is working, and he is earning his money, and he's entertaining his fans. He was all over the stage. He was waving this huge flag. He was doing his thing,
Yeah.
and it was very palpable. It drew you in a way that Black Sabbath did not that night.
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I said I was there, and I would go. Whatever. We almost went to Birmingham.
Yep.
But that's what I get from Edgar Winter. And all the descriptions of his live show is that he is working. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the quotes I read about him is that, he lives in Beverly Hills with his wife. He doesn't have any kids. He's like, that wouldn't be fair to the kids. I'm touring all the time. I pour all of my life onto the stage. And, you really got to respect that about a rock star who's in it for the work of it,
Mm-hmm.
not just the cliche fame of it. And so many rock stars are drawn to the spotlight and the limelight. And Rush's Limelight song is such a poetic way of capturing exactly what I'm talking about. People are drawn to that light, but it's the people who really work hard that really deserve that spotlight. And he strikes me, and this band strikes me as that kind of a performance band.
Yeah, and the way yes, I completely agree. And the way I think about it is Edgar Winter strikes me as a working musician.
Right.
He's not a rock star. He's not it's not glitz and glamour, and even if it were, he's exactly what you said. It's like he's doing it because that's all he knows how to do. It's all he wants to do. It's what he loves to do, and he just wants to kick
And
ass.
he's known for that,
Right.
right? He's been on all these he's been a session musician for headliners. That like it's interesting when you start to dive into music the way that we've been doing it, because you recognize that there are these session musicians, that they work for a studio or they're just professional working musicians and they end up on a lot of recordings. Jazz is full of that. These guys that they just appear on 100 albums and they're awesome, but they're not the headliner ever. And they're not in a band and they don't tour with a band. They just are these session musicians and they're great. And he occurs to me as one of these guys because he just loves it. It just is clear that he loves what he's doing and he's drawn to it and he's good at it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you think of people that have his biographies, at least I think of everybody in the circle of Steely Dan as an example. Steely Dan is one of my all-time favorite bands, and they are generally a band you either completely love and identify with, or you completely hate and you think they're pompous, white boys trying to play jazz kind of thing. Yeah, and two things can be true. And with Steely Dan, you think of these guys who are like incredibly technically proficient and sort of taskmasters and very kind of meticulous in the studio and all of these things, as this very cookie cutter kind of studio musician that Edgar Winter is fully capable of being from a technical aspect, but he also has that kind of heart and grit and griminess that gets him into our conversation when chronicling heavy, which Steely Dan
Yeah.
certainly would not.
Right. Right.
So for him to have,
There's sort of like an intuition there that some kind of like like there's more of a improvisation there, right? Whereas Steely Dan and there's these other bands that are rigorous. I heard that Jethro Tull was like this,
oh
just
yeah,
very like rigorous, and they craft these songs, and it's got to be their way, and
Pink
they're
Floyd,
ruthless,
yeah.
right? He doesn't strike me as that kind of musician. It sounds like he's in it for the fun and the talent, and he knows what he's doing, and he surrounds himself with other people that play off of that, and they all amplify each other.
Well, he seems like a dude that would be in a bar band,
Right,
but
right,
he's way too talented to be in a bar band. Not to diminish any bar bands, I love bar bands, but that
sure.
he's more accomplished than that. And I didn't know the thing about the keyboard strap, the
Mhm.
keytar. What would the '80s have done without Edgar Winter?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, the keytar is another order of magnitude. He just put a
that's true.
strap on a keyboard, right?
No, yeah, right.
Keytar's got something else
Got a
going
neck,
on.
right?
Right. But so you mentioned something that I wanted to comment on because I know that you disagree with me on this, but this is another area that supports what you were saying. You were making the point that some instrumentals you want more of a song there,
Hmm.
and other instrumentals, it's there's a little maybe a little bit more one dimensional, a little more flat. Um, Bad Brains intro from Eye
Yeah.
Against Eye. I was so disappointed that that didn't keep going into a song. And then when Quickness came out and it did go into a song, I was elated, and you were put off by that.
Yeah, I think we have talked about this many times over the years. I think a lot of that is time and place. I knew that as Eye Against Eye was my favorite Bad Brains record. I knew that as the intro to the song Eye Against Eye on the album Eye Against Eye. Quickness is the album that comes out after that, and they had taken that riff and expanded it into another song. And I'm like, no, wait, that, you're only supposed to play that riff for like 8 bars, and then you're supposed to start playing Eye Against Eye. So I think it's just, the order. Like if I would have heard Quickness first, I
Yeah.
probably would have felt like they truncated what was supposed to be a longer song, but because I
I don't
was
know because I heard Eye Against Eye first, and then I heard Quickness, and I loved that. And
well,
like,
I don't hate you for being wrong.
I don't see much of a difference between that and bands that have an album with the same song that comes back later and they do a revision of it.
Reprise, yeah,
Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Like,
yeah, so good.
you know, you could do that. It's okay.
I don't have take umbrage with it conceptually. Just the
Just
execution.
that riff, that song.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
don't do that to me.
All
Don't
right.
do that
Well,
to me.
maybe we'll get more into that in our Bad Brains
We will talk
discussions.
about Bad Brains, and I am looking at our list of songs, you may or may not have recognized this. In several episodes from now, when we get to 1977, we will be talking about Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla on the show.
Yeah. And I don't know if you put that on there or I put that on there, but it pairs well with Frankenstein.
Yeah, and you got to talk about Blue Oyster Cult. They're one of the greats.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to mention about this song?
No, I mean it scratched an itch I didn't know I had, which was excited. And look, this everything we have talked about is why this is so much fun. It's like you bring this song to the table. It made me go back and deep dive all of these great guitar rock, surf guitar, Latin guitar, all these guitar instrumentals that I've never considered all together as a package, which was super fun. I didn't know the Edgar Winter Group or Edgar Winter, and now having him and their discography to dig into is super excited. And the song Frankenstein not only is a total jam, is a perfect complement and another a better way to say it. Uh, uh, the exact right puzzle piece, or one of the right puzzle pieces, to add to our large tapestry that we are trying to construct. So I think, you add that in there along with, the Tarkus, who we talked about last week, and Alice Cooper, who we're going to be talking to about in a few weeks, and Edgar Winter's Frankenstein just fits really nicely into the conversation. So I'm really glad you brought it. It's a jam, and it is destined for multiple playlists. I can tell you that.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Well, Michael, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode.
Not before, Dave.
Not before we plug.
No, not
Oh my
before.
God. How could I forget?
How could you forget?
How could I forget Song v Song?
Song v song.
I'm looking back at our list, and I had Budgie's Guts, and I believe you have.
The Who's Won't Get Fooled Again is my song.
That's right. You had the Stooges for a long time until we met the Who. Tonight, the Who Won't Get Fooled Again versus Frankenstein. How does it fare?
Well, the Who is getting fooled again, because I am taking Frankenstein. Because to me, this song, this excitement I am feeling for this song that was not in my, certainly not in my regular rotation, and was not really in my musical vocabulary, is now part of my musical vocabulary, thanks to you, thanks to this show. So it is now my current champion.
Oh my goodness, folks, we have unseated the Who after 5 episodes it took. This is the 5th episode it took. That might be the longest running.
I don't know. I had the Stooges for a long time.
You did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the Stooges were the longest streak. Well, tonight versus Budgie Guts, I'm going to have to choose Edgar Winter Group Frankenstein.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
I love this song.
Dude,
and both of those are very close to each other on one of the playlists I listen to a lot on my motorcycle because I can hear it through the wind.
Yeah.
But I love it every time. I love it every time.
It's
really
a great
good.
Jam. It's really
glad
good.
to have brought it to the discussion.
Yeah.
And
it's mean. It's mean.
Well, it's mean, but it's cool, and it's
cool's a better word, actually. Cool's a better word.
Yeah, it feels cool. Like that first riff that it opens with sounds a little bit like a growl or a snarl.
Yeah, it's so good, man.
It's great. It just has all the right elements. So, well, thank you for joining our discussion on Edgar Winter Group Frankenstein. And we will see you back next week. We have exited another year, which means, of course, next week we talk about the Black Sabbath album that came out in this year.
We do.
Whenever we have a year that a Black Sabbath album came out in, at the end of the year of songs, we will talk about the Black Sabbath album.
That's right.
And so tee us up.
You said it perfectly. We are to volume 4, which is very smartly titled as Black Sabbath's 4th record. And we have had a lot of fun talking about the first 3. Volume 4 is a unique animal in the catalog for a number of reasons that we will get into, and it is a personal favorite of mine. So I'm very, very much looking forward to getting into that conversation.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight, and we look forward to talking to you about Black Sabbath next week.
Can I say it, Dave?
You can say it.
Okay, thank you. Bye.